Pittsburgh is not New York. Therefore, no matter how he weasels and tunnels, Gavin Newsom will never be able to transform what he says happened into what did. I'll try to work out for you some of the details based on the authenticity of my actual memory events. And the off chance that it might help you figure out what you should be doing. When I interviewed Peter Gabriel at the Stanley Theater, what was it, 1982 or something, my purpose was simply to improve my poetry. Through contact with a mind who I thought had an aptitude for language. It's not hard to see the proof of that either. When his assistant began inundating me with notes, memos and postcards and travel books, she codified her language to mention what she called the season of truculent machines. I had to ask my mother what truculent meant. She's an English teacher. She said spoiling for a fight. I didn't notice the reference to season of glass. It never occurred to me, even though Harcourt said she name dropped Joni Mitchell, that she was having lunch and schmoozing with Yoko Ono. I understand what happened behind the scenes in New York because they also don't understand that Pittsburgh is not New York. Somebody said, oh, this is like an anti-Basquiat. We have to make him the predator who isn't allowed to become rich and famous off his art. The culture in Pittsburgh and the unions, it squashes anybody who tries to get ahead, is well enough known to me that even without the convoluted corruption of Mason lodgers kidnapping and torturing grade school children, giving them hysterical substances and saying it's all in fun to kidnap them in stolen cars, and then make pork barrel at the comic book store about Operation Monarch, puppeteering of the displaced psyche of the sublimated trauma. In those days, they denied that I had been tortured because it would seem like a crime. Now they don't care because it's so normal to torture people. That's why at some point I started being a little bit openly cautious about what was happening with the government. I mean, what I was doing was normalizing something. I was normalizing poetry. I like my poetry. I don't like when it gets torn out and contorted and tributes are demanded of me, but some of my poems pass the exam of economy and poignancy that I consider my achievements. And some of them are dramatically flared, you know, I enjoy reciting them. These other people are cosmonautic Christians who take advantage of others' weaknesses and exploit them, to not just to prevent them from getting ahead, but to injure them and get glee at the expense of someone who's suffering. And what they normalize is the idea that humanism, which is public schools, you know, public welfare and so on, is pornography. And they invest in pornography to pull that off. These comic book store types had me in custody. One of them showed up just once, but in his work was cameo in prison's disaster. They took me hostage as a child. The detectives for the police force ignore that somebody talking about me said that I was imprisoned as a child. The comic book store people say, no, you were trying to get ahead by exploiting Yoko Ono. How's that for an absurd idea? When I didn't even know that Yoko Ono had any interest in me. But it makes sense to their marble machine, and so they scatter them on the floor so everybody falls for it. And they codify a big slander about sex and so forth. It's really very tedious. And when it came out what they were really doing, I was appalled at the way they were using ego inflation from the paid news to cast me in a sinister spy story. And without, while lying to the other victims, setting up, for example, what they did in Gaza. It is, in fact, what Thomas Mann calls a gangster coup. And what we have is to thank for that is Frank Zappa. Because when it came to Zappa, he was encouraging and enjoying the company of the worst pedo predators that Pittsburgh had to offer people, like Ralph Morrislack. And when I reflected on trusting Peter Gabriel and Robert Fripp, I came across this little book of Thomas Mann. He says, the fault is ours, so perhaps it is to our credit that we were not politicians enough to see through it. Despite all that had gone before, including the transparently disingenuous, disgraceful comedy of non-intervention carried out by England in favor of Franco, we could not credit the prospect of such heaped-up knavery and maneuvering. Let me interject one thing there. He's talking about the British. If you didn't know that already, or you figure it out from what he said. We could not credit the prospect of such heaped-up knavery and maneuvering. I mean, how do you credit the prospect of such heaped-up knavery and maneuvering as demonstrated by Peter Gabriel and Robert Fripp? Our simplicity was culpable. What else could it be but hypocrisy to behave as though one believed in those pullings about our brothers in the Sudetenland, when everybody knew there was not a question of the brothers, but of the Skoda Works, Czech industry, Romanian oil, Hungarian grain. It's not a question of the workers, but of the spirit divvies the licky chops can get from a bad faith Hollywood. So we know basically the issues that have come down the highway with this super duper Ku Kluxagram, meant to benefit the good kind of black people in the Ark, with Bobby Kennedy Jr. and them. My mother explained to me why she left the church one time. And she didn't go into gory details about people kidnapping her son and calling it Zionism, and the critics of those people calling it justified car theft. She didn't have to. She basically just said the church was set up as a way to rob the poor and call it idealism.